Hi, I'm really excited. I finally got to try out the two major upgrades I did this past winter on this bike. The replacement of the original coil fork with the hydraulic damping to an air fork, and the conversion of these tires to tubeless. The ride had a bunch of really deep, muddy sections, some good steep climbs up some really rocky, rutty areas, and some nice fast descents, and the amount of control that the new fork gave was just unbelievable. So I would definitely recommend, if you have an entry-level or mid-level bike that came with a coil fork, definitely consider upgrading to the air fork. You can get one for about 250 bucks. In this video, I'm going to do a quick rundown. I'll show you what's inside here, how it all goes together, how I did it. You'll see that it really isn't that difficult. It's something that anyone who can turn a wrench can do. Break it down for you, and you'll be able to do it for yourself. Okay, let's talk a little bit about how this whole thing goes together. It's really quite simple. You have the top cap here, which is held in by a bolt. The purpose of this bolt is simply to load the bearings of your headset to the proper tension. The whole assembly is held together by your stem. And that's basically the whole thing in a nutshell. First thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be removing the brake caliper. It is a 4mm Allen key. There are a series of washers on here. Watch the orientation of those and try to keep those on the nut as best you can. And what I like to do when I remove a nut, even if it's on a component that I'm going to be not putting back on the bike, is to just thread them back where they came from with everything in order. That way I don't have to worry about remembering, oh geez, how did those washers go? So we're just going to pop those into place just like that. Next thing, we're going to be unscrewing this top cap. Again, 4mm Allen screw. Just comes right off. It's very easy. Nothing to it. If you can turn a wrench, you can replace the fork on your bike. We're going to keep this all together. Make sure we don't lose it. We're going to loosen up the stem. Now, once this is loose, there's a possibility that this could slide out, so you want to hold on to the fork to keep that from happening. This can come right off, and I'm just going to flip them down and let them hang. Now you're going to have a number of spacers here. This determines the height of your handlebars. If you want to make a change to the riding position of your bike by adding or removing spacers, now's the time to do that. You can, like I said, you can increase the height of this. If you want it a little higher this way, you can add a spacer. If you want it a little bit lower, you can take a spacer away. I'm going to take all 3 spacers off. I have 3 of them on here. Put those in order off to the side. Now, like I said, this fork's already been out once, so it should come out fairly easy. Just a light tap. You might need to use a mallet and a hammer. If you're using a metal hammer, never hit metal to metal. Get a block of hardwood, put it over there, and you can give it some light taps, and the whole thing will slide right out, just like so. Now on the bottom here is the lower bearing. Sometimes this will come out, sometimes it won't, but make sure you don't lose that. On the top, you're going to have a little split ring that kind of locks everything down right here. The upper bearing and the upper seal. This all comes apart. I'm going to kind of leave it together for now. One of the things that we're going to be doing when you do this is you want to clean all these bearing surfaces. This has never been serviced. This grease is very, very gummy and it's kind of not the nicest. So I'm going to be cleaning that up and repacking it with fresh grease. This you can slide right off the top here. Keep everything in the order that you found it, and set it aside. Which brings us to the most difficult part of this entire process, and that is getting this upper bearing race off. It's a steel piece that's press fit onto aluminum, and for those of you who have aluminum wheels on your cars, and have ever had to take one off, you know how sometimes they can seize together. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to spray a little bit of PB Blaster around here. I'm going to let that soak in before I try to take it off. Another option is to bring it to your local shop and have them pull that off. I'm going to give it a go. So there, we have the fork off. That took us all of 5 minutes, if that. So we're going to carry on from there. Okay, so while that's soaking, I'm going to start with a lower bearing race here. It's pretty disgusting. If you look, oh man, it's not even grease. It's more like tar. I'm going to have to use some sort of a solvent to get that out, to get all that crud out of there. Okay, let's put a little Simple Green on here. It's one of my favorite degreasers for things like this. It works quite well. Oh yeah, that looks a lot better. Do the same thing with the bearing itself. Now we have to do the same thing with the top. Again, get it nice and clean on the inside. I already did most of it earlier. Again, you have the seal, the top piece, and the wedge. The plastic pieces tend to hold the grease a little more tenaciously than the metal ones do, and some like the split ring here, the wedge that holds it in place, you want to make sure you don't break that when you put it in. So now that I've got all that nice and clean, the only thing I have left are the bearings themselves. These are going to be a bit trickier. These are in cages. We want to make sure that we get all of that grease off of there, all that old caked on grease, that they're dry, and that we don't lose any of these bearings. Looks like I'm going to have to soak that in some kind of a solvent or degreaser to get that off. That's really on there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this both of these bearings in a tray with a little bit of Simple Green and a little bit of water, let them soak for a few minutes, and then I'm just going to wipe them down. And I'm sure most of you can figure out how to do that. Main thing, again, all the grease off, all that old tarry, disgusting grease that you're seeing on there, all that has to come off. You want these nice and shiny and clean, and you want them completely dry before you go to put these back together. This brings us to the most difficult part of this whole process, and that is getting this lower bearing race off of the old fork. It's been soaking for a while. Let's see how easy it is to get it off. I have a screwdriver here it's an old screwdriver that's been filed to a sharp point, and I'm just going to be using a hammer as well to, if you look, there's a little notch on here on both sides, and I'm just going to try to work it slowly and gently up the tube to get it off. And now you got to be careful. I don't want to damage the steerer tube, and I particularly don't want to damage the bearing race. So we'll see how this goes. Hopefully it doesn't give me too much difficulty, and I'm just going to use light taps, and once it starts to work its way up, we'll see if it how well it goes. Again, I don't want to pry it, just want to separate it. And it looks like there's a space forming there. Now the tools that they make to do this, there's one that goes over and it has two wedges that force their way underneath the bearing to pull it up. And then there's another one that's just, it's like a V-shaped wedge that goes under there. This screwdriver looks like it's doing the job. Again, I'm going to have to take your time with it. Don't rush it. Light taps. And if it looks like it's really fused on there, take it to a shop and have them. But this looks like it's actually going. Be paying particular attention not to damage this top surface right around here, because that's the bearing surface that carries the load. Looks like we got it. There it is. Not bad. Okay, now that we have that off, we can measure this tube, get our dimensions, and transfer those over to the new fork. Now we have to measure and cut the steerer tubes so that it's the right length. Easiest thing to do is to measure the old one. So looks like it is 7 13/16. Without the bearing race on, you have to take the bearing off before you can measure. So what we'll do is we're going to transfer that measurement onto our new fork. 7 13/16. And we're going to put a line on there. Now that I have the baseline measurement from the old fork measured out, it's time to put the race on the new fork. So we're going to put a little bit of grease around the base here where it goes on, and a little on the bearing race itself. It has to be pressed it on a little bit tight. You saw how it came out off the old fork. Not too much grease on here. We don't want it to be collecting dirt and grime and stuff while we're riding. So just enough, and we'll put a little bit inside the inner part of the race, and that just gets dropped right over the top. And now we have to press that on there so that it's nice and flat. I have a hardwood block here, and I'm just gonna gently tap it down with my hammer. If I can find my hammer. Here it is on the floor. Just where you want to leave your tools. Let's go around and gently tap it on until it's all the way down. This fork still has the piece on here, so I don't have to worry about damaging the dropouts. You'd want to put it on a towel or something if you didn't have that. And you want to use hardwood. You don't want to use like a piece of pine or something, because it won't transfer the energy or hammer blows. That's going on nicely, it looks like. You can also use a piece of PVC pipe if you have the right size. Push that on there. It's almost on. Still got a little space there I gotta get out. Edge it on little by little. Little by little. Give it a couple more taps just to make sure. And we'll move on. Alright, we're good. Now, you can use a pipe cutter to cut an aluminum steerer tube. That's what I'm going to be using. If you're using carbon fiber, you need a hacksaw, and you're going to want some kind of a block to make sure you get a nice square cut. The main thing you're worried about is getting a nice, clean, square cut across, so that when you drive your star nut in, your star nut is level, because that's what's going to be leveling your star nut. Now, if you're using a pipe cutter, you need to take your time with it. Don't rush, because you're squeezing the this aluminum is soft, and as you get in, you're gonna kind of push the edges in. And this is the moment of truth, because if you mess this up, then you've messed up your fork. And that looks like about right where I want it. Yep, that's going to be good. All right. So again, we're going to take our time. Go around carefully. Let the cutter cut. And not force it. Looks like it walked a little bit. Or it gets too deep. Oh, that's dead on. That's dead on. Again, if you're using carbon fiber, you spent a lot of money. Buy the right tools, get a good sharp hacksaw blade, and do it that way. But aluminum, this works just fine. Just have to clean the edges up when you're done, which we'll do. Oop, it's going through. I can feel it hear it crunching. There we go. All right, there's our cut. Compare it to this one. It's almost exact. All right, now we're going to clean up the edge. Okay, that left a little bit of a lip around the edge here that we're going to have to just file off. Aluminum's nice and soft, so it won't take much. Just going to go around, clean up the edges. Both the inside edge and the outside edge. I'll use a little fine sandpaper on the top. Hold it upside down so that the filings don't go in the fork. That's better. Actually, just noticed I have a pipe reamer that might do this a little bit faster. Let's see if this does it. I'm gentle. Oh yeah, that's doing what we need, and I can do the inside as well. Again, holding it upside down so any metal shavings don't go into it. Fine sandpaper to polish it up. All right.
Close up.
Get all the filings off, particularly off the race with grease on it, and off the stanchions. Okay, so now we have it nice and polished, so that it'll look good where you can't see it. It's always important to look good in places where you can't see it. Now, you have to put the star nut in the top here. We showed you that on the other fork earlier. There are a number of ways to do this. If you look online, you'll see a million different people doing a bunch of different ways to put a star nut into the steerer tube of the fork. My preferred method is with a correct tool. If it doesn't go in straight, then you're going to have problems. I got this tool for 23 bucks. Money well spent. That way I'm sure that this is going to go in correctly. So what we're going to do is we're going to thread this on. Make sure that it's pointing the right way. It goes down so that the little star things angle up. Just put it on so that it's most of the way on. This is one of the Pedros that has the sleeve. I like the ones with the sleeve. It's about $2 more than the Park tool. Then we just drive it in. Don't go any further. Unscrew. and you have a perfectly set star nut. What could be simpler
Hold it up for us close up.
than trying to futz around with an old top cap and tap it in so that it's straight? This is in straight, it's into the proper depth, and it's ready to go. So now we're all set, we're ready to put it all together. So let's get to it. Putting this all together is pretty much the opposite of what we did before. If you remember, we took all the bits and pieces off, and now we're just going to put them all back on. Put grease in the lower bearing race already. I'm just going to double check that. The bearing is still stuck up in there from when I took it off when we measured. And I'm just going to put a little more grease in there. Make sure that's well greased and lubricated. A little more grease on the bearing race. And I have to put the grease into the top race. I want it nice and packed. Lower seal goes on there. Lower bearing's already in place, otherwise I would have stuck it on here. Make sure all the bits and pieces that you're going to need, that was just a cover to my grease, are within easy reach. All your spacers, your upper bearing, and upper bearing race. We're just going to, again, make sure the handlebars are in the right position. We're not going to be able to get this around. Slide this up and in. Upper bearing. A little more grease around that. Upper bearing race top cap, and last, the wedge. Push everything down nice and tight, particularly that wedge that's got to go in there and hold it all together. So want to wipe any excess grease off before I put the spacers on. Okay. 3 spacers, 1, 2, 3, or however many you're going to use. We can put our handlebars on and see how we did cutting. And it looks like we did pretty good. And the top cap. This is temporarily going to hold it in place. Again, like I told you in the beginning, all this is going to do is load the bearings, and then we're going to tighten it all down with the top cap, or with the stem bolts. But before we do that, oh, that looks nice. We're going to want to put the bike on the ground and load it up that way. You don't want to try loading them up and see how tense it is when you have it on here. So we're going to put the wheels on, take it off the stand, put it on the ground, and we're going to load up these bearings that way, and then tighten it, make sure everything's nice and straight, then tighten it down. We have the bike on the floor. We're just going to tighten this top cap enough. I'm going to make it a little tight first. Okay, so if there's no play, I don't have the brake on, so it's going to be a little bit tough to determine that, but we'll just try it out. Okay. Now we can tighten the handlebar stem, and that's going to clamp everything into place. We get it a little bit tight and make sure everything's nice and straight. And then I have to put the brake caliper back on. Good. And then we'll double check to make sure that we have it right. Feels good. Feels a lot better than it did with all that disgusting grease that was in there before. And this fork, oh man, that's amazing compared to what was on there before. Put it back on the stand and put the brake back on. Well, second to the last thing, because I still have to put the pop lock for the remote for the lockout on, is I need to reinstall my brake caliper. So I left everything pretty much as it was. I'm just gonna put it on for now. I'm not gonna adjust it, get it centered or anything like that. I'm just gonna get it on there so that I don't have this thing hanging, or the cable, which is gonna go right along here. It's got a nice little guide there, and actually on both sides, this is nice. It's got the cable guide, and on the back, it's got a little notch here for the cable tie to hold that in place. So that's a nice little touch that this Dart 3 didn't have, and like I said before, they put the cable guides in the back, which you really don't want the cable there because when the wheel turns, it's gonna pull on the cable and it can catch. They always start steel bolts into aluminum by hand. Don't want to start them with a tool because it's really easy to strip. They have those started. I can goes the rest of the way in. Put the wheel on, get them somewhat centered before I tighten it. I should have the cable going on the outside. Easier to take the cable off and reroute it than it is to switch it. So what I'm going to have to do is take this cable out, route it to the outside so that it comes in. So that it comes to the outside of the fork, because I don't want it in a position where the tire can catch on it and while it's rotating and pull on it. But I'll do that later. See what I'm saying? You can see right here already it's an issue. So I'm just going to take the cable off, and I have to readjust the brakes anyway, so much easier to take the cable off. But you can see why you don't want to have it, because when the tire rolls, so I'll have to take care of that. Alright, we want the cable running on the outside, like that. Spin it around so you can see better. On the outside. And this, when I'm ready, I can zip tie that right there. That's it. One more quick check. I'm going to pull it off the stand. Make sure that it's got good tension. Feels good. And that's it. We're all done. Hope that's helpful. If you ever need to either change out a fork or do maintenance on your headset. Thanks for watching. There it is.